He studied philosophy at Harvard. He used to be a corporate bigwig who quit to devote his time to full-time writing. He has written extensively for publications around the world, and he writes regular columns for 6 Indian newspapers in various languages. Mr. Gurcharan Das, welcome to Straight Talk. So you've been frequently referred to as a classical liberal. So looking at the post-Brexit Europe, Trump's America, and looking at the way France, Netherlands, Germany is supposed to go, and even looking closer at home at India, how do you see the world, this new world?
Well, it's clearly a disappointment. All the things that liberals have represented in the past 200 years, but particularly in the last 70 years after the war, Second World War, these ideals and the achievements that liberals have made are now under a threat. You know, we forget that liberalism has been the sort of driving force of change for many centuries. And certainly in the last 20th century, all the arguments were won by the liberals. And so, frankly, India's independence was driven by liberal ideas. The collapse of communism was driven by liberal ideas. India's economic reforms was driven by liberal ideas. So it is clearly has been a force for the good. But I think it's important we distinguish between the classical liberal and the left liberal. This is a confusion in the minds of people. The classical liberal believes in the economic arrangements are different between the classical liberals. Classical liberals believe in private initiative. They believe in competition in the marketplace. They believe that we should, for them, market outcomes are reassuring rather than interventions by governments. So classical liberals are very wary of statism, of the state getting into business. They want the state to do its job, which is governance. The left liberal, on the other hand, tends to be much more statist. It believes in the ability of the government to deliver. And that is the basic difference between the two. And that's why when we talk about being right of center, we're talking about the classical liberal, and left of center with the left liberal. However, what they have in common is both have a great belief in liberty, in human liberty. And so the social agenda of both would be the same.
A classical liberal typically, he believes in freedom, complete freedom of speech, freedom of access, freedom of rights, and freedom of markets. But do you think to some extent the markets allow you that kind of freedom?
The state that we have created, the modern democratic state, it is also grounded on liberal principles. And what is a modern liberal state? Modern liberal state has 3 pillars. One, it believes in giving power to an executive who should be given the ability to perform, to get things done. So it should be strong. The second pillar is the pillar of the rule of law. So the action of the executive should be within the boundaries of the rule of law. And a third pillar is that action of the state should be accountable to the people. So these are the 3 pillars. And the main issue in India today is the inability of the state to do that. Why should it take 15 years to get justice in the courts? Why should it take 12 years to build a road? Ultimately, we need the reform of the institutions. Just as much we need economic reforms, we also need the reform of the institutions, the bureaucracy, for example. Why should the bureaucrat who works 2 hours a day and a bureaucrat who works 14 hours a day get promoted on the same day, earn the same salary? Why should the police register an FIR if it comes from an MLA versus a poor person? So these are issues partly of state capacity. And I think what's happened in India is that we keep talking about accountability, but we forget that we have our state itself needs to be reformed.
Tell me something, why do not liberals get elected to positions of power?
Well, this is a good time to ask this question when we have several elections going on, and certainly an election in a state like UP, which is identified with Gunda Raj. And we are, the fear I have every time is an election like this comes around, that we will be electing a criminal, we will be electing a corrupt populist, we will be electing a member of a family dynasty, political dynasty, but we won't be electing an independent-minded, thoughtful, liberal who wants to do reforms.
Is it also the inability of the liberal to kind of reach out to people?
I think that it is partly it could be that, but also the liberal message, especially that of the economic liberal, is difficult. You know, the ordinary candidate will say, you remember Arvind Kejriwal, who got up there and he said, I will give you free water, I will give you electricity at half price. And another candidate will say, I'll give you rice at 2 rupees. Now these kinds of populist appeals will always be more successful than a liberal's appeal who will say that I will create conditions for investment, investment will come, production will take place, there will be competition between players, costs will come down, prices will come down, and everybody will gain. And the people will say, by then you'll be gone, my friend, so why do we trust you? This is what Adam Smith called the invisible hand. Now the fact is that invisible hand is invisible. The voter cannot see it, and therefore the populist will always win at election time. And therefore, if a liberal wants to be successful, and this has historically been true, then the liberal has to tie himself up with somebody who offers identity politics. So in the Republicans in America, you know, the liberals like Governor Rockefeller and all came into that party. But they had to put up with the Christian right, which was against abortion. So all these things, in the case of Samuel and the Brexit Tory party conservatives had to put up with, you know, some little Englanders, or Margaret Thatcher, who was the most famous classical liberal of modern times. She had to keep control on the social and cultural agenda of the Tories in order to pursue her policy of the reforms. So therefore, even in India, let's take India, that when today what's happened is that a lot of liberals are actually supporting Modi's Vikas agenda. They are not comfortable with the cultural agenda of the BJP, the Hindutva, but the economic agenda they are supporting. But there is a tension. The guys who want Hindutva have a different agenda, that's the cultural agenda. So this is very similar to the Republicans or the Tories in other countries.
So coming back to India, you've been following policy matters for long. So how do you really view this demonetization exercise that we underwent?
Well, I think demonetization was a mistake. But
Why?
luckily, I mean, everybody is allowed to make one mistake. And up till now, the economy had been reasonably well managed. And even after that, frankly, this budget was a reassuring budget. The reason why it was a bungle is because this is not the way you go after black money. If you want to go after black money, then you have to take other steps. Here, to bring so much pain to 90% of your people in order to catch a few, it was an exercise. I mean, we are still waiting for a cost-benefit analysis. And I think long term there will be some gains. India moves into a much more digital economy, much more formal economy. More people will be paying tax, and their savings rate of the country will go up. The deposit rate of the banks will go up. And this will lead to lower interest rates, and it will lead to higher economic activity. But those are long-term gains. But in the next quarter or two, we are in serious trouble because we don't know how many people have lost their jobs and have gone home, and it will take time. So we've lost just when we had a problem with jobs. You know, jobs were not coming. You had a setback.
How do you view the collusion between the political class and industry in India, which has been going on for long?
Well, I mean, that's certainly, it was much worse during the days of the license Raj. And in the sectors that we have reformed after 91, that collusion has come down. However, there are still some sectors like mining, real estate, which are unreformed. Education is another unreformed sector. And there you still have license Raj, and you still have administrative discretion, political discretion, and you have this collusion. And the answer to that, of course, is to keep reforming and reduce the discretion of the politicians. I think it's very good that in the last few years we've had mining and spectrum given out on auction basis, and so you've avoided the scandals that you have with Mr. Raja and 2G and other and so on. I would say at the end of the day, this whole narrative of crony capitalism is an overblown narrative, because actually you had crony socialism, which was much more pervasive. And even now, it should not be called crony capitalism, because in the market where capitalism prevails, which are the reform sectors where you have competition, you don't have crony capitalism. It is the socialist sectors where government still decides is where you have crony capitalism. So I would say the right word is not crony capitalism, it's crony socialism. And the way answer, of course, is reform. One of the problems is this, that our reformers have not sold the market. People do not distinguish between being pro-market and pro-business. They think that it's the same thing. They think that the market makes the rich richer and the poor poorer. That's why they don't like reforms, because they think that's what happens with the reforms. The fact of the matter is that, it's not true. Competition, what it does in the marketplace is it encourages people to, in order to gain market share, to improve their products, lower their costs, lower their prices, and this helps everybody. Margaret Thatcher used to say that she would spend 80% of her time selling the reforms and only 20% of the time doing the reforms. So this is very, very important, that our reformers have let us down.
You've discussed this in your book, India Grows at Night. When will actually our society hold our state accountable? for certain things. And I'm not just talking about here corruption or something like that, not the economic aspects of it, but for example, rights.
Yeah. Well, actually, historically in India, the society has always been stronger than the state, unlike in China, where the state has always been stronger than society. And the reality is you need both. You need a strong state to get things done, and you need a strong society to make the state accountable. And so, it's very interesting that in India, the law was preceded the king. The interpreter of the law, the job of the king was to uphold dharma for the sake of the people. The interpreter of the law was not the king, was the Brahmin. So very early on, we had created a liberal division of powers and weakened the state. So now, in my narrative, what is equally important to hold the state accountable, which is your question, what you need is also state capacity. See, what is letting us down is our institutions, our poor institutions. So, as if you can reform the bureaucracy, the police and the judiciary, automatically you will have greater accountability. If you can have justice delivered in a reasonable time, in 2 years or 3 years, then the crooks will also know they can't get away with it and get adjournments for decades.
This is kind of linked to the demonetization question I have already asked you. Do you think India is really ready to make a switch from a cash reliant economy to a digital?
Well, I think it's a no. I mean, the answer is that you have connectivity, which is still, very large percent of the country is not does not have connectivity, but it's growing very fast. I must say that smartphones, India is the fastest growing market for smartphones in the world.
But in 2016, only 35% of Indians had access to the internet.
Yes. So I think this is going to come, and it's an organic process. Demonetization may have accelerated it, but I still feel, that this is not a priority. We have so many priorities in our country. To go digital is not a priority. Digital is very much a friend of the corruption fighter. That is true. But now that we are doing it, it's a good thing, and I think it's accelerating, and the government is giving lots of incentives, and hopefully connectivity will grow, and smartphone prices are coming down, so it won't be far away.
So, Mr. Das, this is a question which has been which have been doing the rounds, and many Indians think a lot, especially the Indians abroad. Will Trump be good for India? And also I want to know, because there was an ASSOCHAM meet. Mr. Mukesh Ambani said that it's actually a boon in disguise for India's IT industry. So do you kind of share that optimism?
Well, it's hard to say. There are positives and negatives. Certainly, if he forces a limit on H-1B visas, a lot of the more work will be done here in India, and in any case, a lot of that gradually, that sort of the work of coders, etc., that we had earlier, is going to be obsoleted by technology. To ask your question whether he'll be good for India, I would say that certainly his protectionism is not good. India needs the world market. Now, if he puts a selective duty on China, and that duty doesn't apply to India, then clearly we'll have some advantage, cost advantage of our goods going into
So you think
America.
we'll kind of have to wait and watch?
We'll have to wait and watch. I think that's the right way to think about it. Politically and certainly Pakistan will feel the heat on terrorism, and as we have already seen that they have put Hafiz Saeed under house arrest, and so terrorism might diminish because he is getting very tough on that, and that's good. Peace is good.
So now let's get back to something about your writing. You know, it's been really long, and if my memory serves me right, it was in the late 80s that A Fine Family came out.
Yeah.
And you had started out with obviously 3 English plays. So, any plan to get back to fiction?
Well, after my 3 plays and the novel, I moved to non-fiction, and India Unbound was the result of the first major non-fiction book. It also resonated with the time. I was the first person to predict the economic rise of India, and India obliged by rising. And then my next big work was The Difficulty of Being Good, where I was seeing prosperity spread around the country, but I saw corruption also spreading and governance problems that we've been talking about. And that too, I mean, there I interrogated the Mahabharata to look at the moral issues, the moral dilemmas that
dharma,
face
yeah.
the dharma issues. So, if you think of India Unbound as artha, if you think in terms of purusharthas, so artha is material well-being, India Unbound, prosperity and wealth and poverty. The difficulty of being good was dharma. So now I'm writing the 3rd purushartha, which is on karma. The book on karma that I'm writing has a fictional core to it. It's a memoir and which is a fictional memoir. It's a novel. It's not my story, but it's a story that I've created. So in a sense, I've gone back to fiction, but the narrator keeps stopping the story and explaining what's going on in the story. It's like the other works which combine philosophy, history, economics, business, but it deals with the whole notion of desire. And to give you an idea, in the beginning, the narrator in the novel describes a scene from when he was a child, 4 years old. And suddenly he is in a room and he feels cold. It's a cold morning. And he then runs into the bed of his mother and he sticks himself to his mother and falls asleep. And he says, "This is my first memory of desire." And then he stops the story and he says, well, you know, desire strikes early in life. It can also come early in a civilization. And so he explains that in the Judeo-Christian tradition, in the beginning was light. God said, "Let there be light." In the Rig Veda, in the beginning was desire. And it was from the seed of desire in the mind of the one that the cosmos was created. So he asks, now what does it say about a civilization where in the beginning was desire? So the book is in a way trying to answer that question.
Mr. Gurcharan Das, it was really a pleasure to have you on Straight Talk. Thank you so much.